popular superstar, the new talent initiative from at least 2011 to 2013. So it's believed that if CM Punk, Phil Brooks ever got out of control, Seth Rollins was going to be that guy, and that's why I think it's really a misfortune for all of us as wrestling fans that we may never see CM Punk versus Seth Rollins unless you go back through the years of Ring of Honor in a WWE ring, because I thought that would have been a great way to set up for the championship match of the future if we would have had seen Seth Rollins versus CM Punk at some point in time. And they were teasing that match because of the segments they would have on NXT when Rollins was NXT champion. You can't forget about that and how great that looked on his resume. He was NXT champion. CM Punk was WWE champion at the time, coming in for episodes of NXT, providing commentary and his opinion on some of the upcoming superstars. And one guy who he's really high on was Seth Rollins when he was doing commentary with his announcer's jacket. And I thought it was really a misfortune for wrestling fans never getting a chance to see that match. So it's really unfortunate that we probably never will see that with CM Punk obviously seeing he has a future, or thinking he does, with the UFC. So obviously this is why Rollins has been the answer for CM Punk for a really long time. And when you look at the injury list right now, this close to WrestleMania, Randy Orton is still out, John Cena is still out, even though he still makes appearances for WWE recently at the Daytona 500 with Florida Georgia Line, who I believed performed on the Raceway with John Cena there to promote WWE and everything going on with them. It was pretty amazing seeing Cena making all these appearances over the last few months in his absence, still doing things for WWE. But I mean, you look at the DL, the biggest name, John Cena, is out, along with that Randy Orton. Sin Cara is out. Sting is still out as of right now. There's no word on whether or not he's going to be involved with WrestleMania apart from his Hall of Fame induction, but he's out. Daniel Bryan just retired. Their biggest name in the new talent initiative is gone. He's not coming back anytime soon. So you really have to force the issue of putting Seth Rollins back in the main event picture and putting him back in the main event. Even if you don't put him in the main event picture right away, you have to really force the issue of bringing someone like Seth Rollins back, because you just think about and put into perspective how popular of a wrestler someone like Seth Rollins would be. You know, he got on our nerves as a heel, but I mean, who hasn't gotten on our nerves as a heel? Even people like Randy Orton and John Cena as heels early in their career, in the early stages, got on our nerves. People like The Miz, when they were champion in the December of 2010, they got on our nerves and they served their purpose really well, because initially they're there to get on our nerves and get paid to get on our nerves, and they do their jobs very well. And the same thing can be said about someone like Seth Rollins. He was champion for over 200 days, and the longer he got on our nerves, the longer, consequently, he was champion. So wrestling psychology played a factor in the direction of Seth Rollins' career. If Seth Rollins was a heel, he was champion, and he wasn't getting on our nerves, then someone else would have been a heel champion and would have been getting on our nerves more effectively than Seth Rollins, and Rollins probably wouldn't have been champion for over 200 days. It was annoying seeing Rollins as champion, but it worked. It got on all of our nerves, and the everyday wrestling fan who doesn't really understand the psychology factor of professional wrestling and how it goes and how it can work a number of different ways, obviously it worked on you because you bought into the idea of Rollins being champion. And did I buy into the idea of Seth Rollins being champion? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to hide behind the bush and say that it didn't. I didn't buy into it because I did. The thing was, Rollins was there to get on my nerves, and just from everything he said in promos, the people he was beating, from Sting to Brock Lesnar, it could have been the biggest name or the smallest name, and it just got on my nerves and pissed me off, especially in the follow to WrestleMania 31. WrestleMania 31 had a pretty impressive card. I will go back to WrestleMania 31 and say how it's more outstanding last year than it is this year, because they offered us more in the way of matches like Sting versus Triple H and Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns. Seth Rollins wrestled against Randy Orton prior that night. The best RKO of Randy Orton's career came at the expense of Seth Rollins, but you knew when Seth Rollins and Randy Orton happened early within WrestleMania, within the first 45 minutes to an hour, Rollins was going to factor in to the main event of WrestleMania, especially coming off that triple threat match with Cena and Lesnar at last year's Royal Rumble match. I mean, it was in Philadelphia. Obviously, people didn't agree with the way the triple threat match went, but the one guy that was over in that match was Seth Rollins, so you knew that Seth Rollins was going to factor into the main event of WrestleMania because he had that briefcase as a variable that was hanging over our heads weeks prior to WrestleMania, and because nobody who had had that briefcase before and cashed it in at WrestleMania, they'd only won the briefcase at WrestleMania. The thing is, that briefcase was holding over our heads for a really long time, and you kind of knew it was going to factor into the main event of WrestleMania. But in the end of the day, it pissed me off, and it worked. And that's the thing about wrestling psychology. No matter how you feel about wrestling psychology or some of the greatest wrestling psychologists in the history of the business, the thing is, wrestling psychology always works on the everyday wrestling fan, and it worked on me because Rollins always found a way to piss me off, no matter what he said or no matter what he did in the way of his actions. And that's why he was always Triple H and Stephanie and Vince's favorite wrestler, and he was always their go-to guy for someone to put over. And as long as Seth Rollins kept getting on her nerves, he kept winning. The same thing can be said about an everyday wrestling fan who makes a transition from being a fan into a wrestler. As long as that everyday fan can get on her nerves, he's going to go to the distance in professional wrestling. As long as he's putting numbers, zeros at the end of numbers in professional wrestling and giving WWE numbers, as long as he's producing, he's going to be the one who's going to be put over all the time and always be in the main event, no matter how good of a wrestler you are. Chris Morandansky is a perfect example of a guy who's a consummate worker, who is a great wrestler, who never got a chance to be over with professional wrestling because he never did get the numbers for WWE over Daniel Bryan or CM Punk. So consequently, CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, Ring of Honor talents, were always over before someone like Chris Morandansky, Chris Masters, better known to wrestling fans as an analyst, was never over a Daniel Bryan or a CM Punk. And a lot of people fell victim to the same kind of circumstance. And I can name countless individuals who probably should have been given an opportunity over Daniel Bryan or CM Punk, or even a chance to work with CM Punk or Daniel Bryan, who never got that chance, who were both consummate and great professional athletes and great workers. And that's the thing about the wrestling business. If you're not putting 6 zeros at the end of a number for WWE, if you're not just producing numbers in general, you're not getting over at the end of the day, and that's really sad. But Rollins did everything perfectly. It was almost like he was chiseled out of stone, and they said that about Randy Orton a number of years ago. Randy Orton was someone who looked like a guy who was chiseled out of stone, someone who was getting numbers for WWE and who could have really went the distance, but more times than he was ever given credit for. Randy Orton exemplified a lot of unprofessionalism, but Rollins was someone who was perfectly put in the right place at the right time, and WWE capitalized on that opportunity. You take a look at some of Seth Rollins' independent wrestling years and how Rollins would just use an opportunity to his advantage to really be the highlight of an independent wrestling match. There was one incident where Rollins actually catapulted himself off someone's stomach in the front row to execute a moonsault against whoever he was working at the time. I can't remember who the match was against, but he executed a moonsault off of a fan's stomach who was sitting in the front row at an independent wrestling show. So that really shows you how far Rollins would go to stand out. When WWE took a look at his video footage, they said, this is a guy that we have to sign. They put him in the group with Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose, ran with the Shield idea. They tried to create Shield 2.0 with Joey Mercury and Jamie Noble. It didn't really work. They got him away from that. And now that he's coming back with promising things in store for him in the way of a Shield reunion, another reign as champion, which wouldn't surprise me none, off the 200-plus day reign that he had, and being entitled to another championship match and an opportunity to become champion for possibly even longer, and because he's supposed to be in the main event picture for a really long time, having matches to his credit with Brock Lesnar and Sting, I really think that Rollins has a promising future with WWE, and my opinion of Rollins has drastically changed over the last few months, and I think I can get away with putting him over as a Seth Rollins supporter here early on in 2016. It works both ways. I understand that. Rollins can come back and have a lot of great things in the future in store for him, but it can also work in the way of he'll never get over, because right now Triple H is champion, which is really the only way that he could get over if he got himself into a match with Triple H for that championship, based off now what would be his hatred for the Authority and how they call the shots and run the WWE the way they do, with an abuse of power and over-exaggerating their power and their authority that they have. Right now you have Triple H as champion, and right now it seems like Dean Ambrose is the one WWE are capitalizing on because of the responses that he's getting. He seems to be over someone like a Roman Reigns. And I mean, the place exploded at this year's Royal Rumble when they realized that Dean Ambrose had a chance to go to WrestleMania and eliminate Triple H from the Royal Rumble when it came down to Triple H and Dean Ambrose. I mean, Dean Ambrose seems to be their answer now in the absence of Seth Rollins and someone like a Roman Reigns who never could get over in WrestleMania main events no matter who you put him in the ring against. I mean, they put him in the ring against someone like Brock Lesnar last year. He wasn't over then, and Brock Lesnar dominated the match before Seth Rollins was the wild card in the match. And I don't think that it's going to work putting him in the ring against Triple H this year at WrestleMania if that's what it comes down to. What you need to look at it from a perspective of as a wrestling fan is the fact that someone like Dean Ambrose is over now. And yeah, Dean may be my favorite, but Dean is the one who is your answer right now to everything disastrous happening in professional wrestling in the way of a clusterfuck, because that's really what we're faced with when you're talking about WrestleMania and this year's WrestleMania main event and what it's offering. Right now, it looks like Seth Rollins is your go-to guy. He always was your go-to guy, but now, putting him back in the main event as a fan favorite, you could be making a better and a more smarter move. Because from the point of view of wrestling psychology, Seth Rollins is the answer to everything, and Seth Rollins is what works. And if there's one person we should believe in other than Roman Reigns or Daniel Bryan, these days, the one person who you can't give up on in the way of hope, believing in, and someone who we should be following in the way of a worshiping kind of way or believing in the way of the future is obviously Seth Rollins, because a lot of promise goes with Seth Rollins' personality and or character in professional wrestling, whatever way you perceive this for being and or going. I'm your host, Jonathan Clarke, and I will check in with you again next week.
Like what you hear? Tell us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.